Our weekly Peacock and Williamson mailbag, big-time questions about the Jets and how close they are in landing Aaron Rodgers, what that could look like for both squads, some pushback on our initial thoughts from the contracts for both Daniel Jones and the Seahawks making, or did they make, Geno Smith the long-term answer at quarterback, and a whole bunch more coming up on today's Peacock and Williamson.
NFL analyst Brian Peacock and former NFL scout Matt Williamson bring you expert NFL analysis every day in less than 30 minutes. Get an inside look into the NFL on the field and in the front office. With elite breakdowns, next-level analysis, and in-depth information only for the real NFL fans. This is Peacock and Williamson, and it starts now.
Welcome to the Peacock and Williamson NFL Show. Brian Peacock alongside Matt Williamson at BD Peacock at Williamson NFL. Thanks, everybody, for making us your first listen on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Those Twitter handles is where all the questions are coming from on today's mailbag episode of Locked On 49ers, which is presented by FanDuel, official sports book of the NFL. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. We got to start with the latest, and it is Aaron Rodgers, and seeming more and more inevitable, Matt, that the New York Jets is going to be the landing spot for Aaron Rodgers and the Green Bay Packers, and that maybe that compensation might not be so much that it'll be that prohibitive. Did I say the right word? Prohibitive.
I think you got it. Yeah.
Yeah. It's early for me on the West Coast. I know you had lunch over there on the East Coast. For that trade to be made for, not so costly to the Jets that it's just going to be that difficult to get this thing done. It sounds more and more like Aaron Rodgers to the New York Jets could actually be happening. The Jets did make a trade today. I think it was a seventh rounder next year for Chuck Clark, safety from the Baltimore Ravens.
Yeah, and let's just throw that trade out there. You'll see some of those trades this time of year. And folks, if you're not aware, if you see a seventh rounder for an established veteran, you're probably like, Chuck Clark's a pretty good safety. Well, why do you get him for a seventh round pick? Well, because that means the Ravens were going to cut him, and the Jets didn't want to fight everybody else on the open market for him. He's clearly going to be an NFL player and probably a starter. So, I know we're not going to spend the whole conversation talking about Chuck Clark, but those are the type of deals you'll see between now and the draft to open up cap space. Guy gets a quality starter for a seventh round pick. But if you're about to add Aaron Rodgers' contract to your salary cap, I thought it was a little odd to pick up a contract like Clark, but it's small potatoes. We'll brush over that.
Definitely some small potatoes there.
Yeah.
When it comes to, I've seen multiple questions here. One of them from my co-host, who I work with every single day on Locked On 49ers, Eric Crocker. He phrased it this way as it pertains to just the Packers and Aaron Rodgers. If this is the end for Aaron Rodgers and the Packers, he said, "What's more impressive? That the Steelers, your Pittsburgh Steelers, Matt, we've talked about this a lot on the podcast, have had 3 head coaches in your lifetime since 1969, right? So if you're 50 years old, you've seen 3 head coaches for the Pittsburgh Steelers, or the Packers having just Favre and Rodgers, 2 Hall of Fame quarterbacks for over a 31-year span.
That's unbelievable. It really is. I mean, it's like Mantle or DiMaggio to Mantle in center field for the Yankees, or some of these unbelievable succession plans. Hall of Famers and not even borderline Hall of Famers. I mean, maybe top 10 players at their position ever. Unbelievably impressive. New time is coming. My apologies, BP. I did, I think, 6 different podcasts yesterday. So I think you and I had this conversation, but I forget who I talked about it with Rodgers. So he has a lot of power here. I mean, can't he kind of negotiate this deal and say, I don't want the Packers to get much compensation. You know what I mean? Like, can't he say, let's make it a second round pick, or I'll just retire, or
I think
conditional picks, right.
And that's part of why compensation will make sense for everybody in the end, because it's basically one team and he decides where he's going to go. And if he's like, all right, met with the Jets, we like them, they're willing to do it, let's make this all work. And it's not like there's going to be 10 teams bidding on Aaron Rodgers. But I guess the Packers could sort of, allow some other teams to at least call and be like, look, this team is interested, this team is interested, let's wait. And, any of the parties could hold things up. But I think in the end, I don't think any parties want to hold this up. So I think that's why it ends up getting greased a little bit and makes the whole deal become a little bit simpler for everybody.
But my point was I can see Packers fans being upset with the compensation when it comes through. And you might be, it might be a second-round pick this year and a future second if he plays next year or something like that.
Or just maybe a conditional one next year, depending on how things go. And I at this point, I'd be surprised actually if they get the Jets' first-round pick this year.
I don't think they will. When it's all said and done, I bet they don't, which puts the Jets in a pretty good spot. If you can add Rodgers and still have that first, maybe nothing much else, that's a left tackle or, whatever. I mean, that's a pretty strong roster.
JDS has a two-pronged question here as it pertains to the Jets, Packers, Aaron Rodgers. But as a Packers fan, he says, has the last 30 years we just talked about with Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers, two back-to-back Hall of Fame quarterbacks, if you're a 30-year-old Packer fan, you know nothing else but those two quarterbacks. Has it been a success or a failure with
that's a good question.
All-time quarterbacks, but only 2 rings, one apiece for Rodgers and Favre?
It's a tough question. I mean, curious what your thoughts on it are. I mean, part of it is teams that lived through the Michael Jordan era didn't get many rings, and Brady's Jordan. One guy monopolized a lot of visits to the Super Bowl during the last 20 years or so. And that doesn't make it mean it's okay, but it was a rare time in NFL history where one guy's going consistently. Doesn't make it better. I mean, trust me, I get this question all the time. Was the Roethlisberger era a failure? He got 2 rings. I mean, it was Breeze's era in New Orleans a failure. Only got 1. I don't know. I kind of think if you get 1, that's the ultimate accomplishment. And I don't know that every listener understands how hard it is to do, but it's a very fair question. For 30 years, end up with 2 rings.
I think it's a resounding success if you got a ring over the course of a quarterback or an era of a team or a coach, an era of a coach. I think it's a resounding success if you got a ring and you were competitive most, or if not.
Yeah.
Time. So Steelers, Roethlisberger era, huge success. Packers, Favre and Rodgers, both huge successes to me.
So how about like Eli? Eli got 2 rings, but his down years were bad. I think that's but he's not as good as those guys. I'm sorry.
He's not as good. And I think that was a great success as well. Me too. If the only success is Jordan or Brady, then everybody's
a failure.
Everyone's sad all the time.
Right. It's not the same argument, but was the Eagles' year a success this year? Of course it was.
Right. Yeah.
So was the Bengals. You didn't end up hoisting the trophy, but it was a successful season.
The thing where I would start to question it is what it's looking like with the Los Angeles Rams. You go all in, but your peak was so short. You won it, but then you're falling apart, it looks like. This could be a team, and there's been new reports now. Matthew Berry had the article of the 23 things he heard at the Combine, and that, it still might be the end for Matthew Stafford. He's couldn't throw, and that might continue into next year, and retirement's still potentially on the table for him. And you had those pillars in a Stars and Scrubs roster. McVay and Aaron Donald already thinking about retirement, getting out from under what's collapsing over there. Is that worth it? I would say I would much rather have a competitive team and you get a ring than get a ring and then all of a sudden become non-competitive and potentially. I mean, this might be one of the worst teams in the NFL over the next couple of years if it continues in that path.
Right. I mean, we didn't even mention Allen Robinson's on the trade block now, and Jalen Ramsey could get traded as well. And it's similar. It's not to the same degree, but Tampa Bay recently won a Super Bowl with Brady. They might be the worst team in the league this year. I mean, it's going to get bad for them now, in a hurry. So I still think both those teams are worth it. I think anything's worth it for a ring. And if you go a decade with a great quarterback and only get 1, or you get 2 in 30 years, I think that's a success. 2 in 30 years is about the line, though. You know what I mean? Breeze for 10 years gets 1, great. 30 years of Hall of Famers and only 2 is a really good conversation.
Second part of this from JDS, how much better or worse are the Jets supporting cast compared to the Packers? Would think only an upgrade at number 1 receiver and downgrade everything else, including coaching. What do you think there? Packers roster versus Jets roster now with Aaron Rodgers.
I think the Jets is better. I mean, as currently constructed, yeah. I mean, I don't love the receivers in Green Bay at all, and I adore Garrett Wilson. I mean, I think he's a star. I think that Rodgers would have killed to have Elijah Moore last year, let alone Wilson. kind of out of sight, out of mind. I know running backs don't matter. I think Breece Hall's a star. I mean, getting him back to that offense is gigantic. Imagine
it's amazing because with the New York Jets last year, they had the offensive and defensive rookie of the year.
Right.
And if Breece Hall stays healthy, they had the other offensive rookie of the year, right?
Exactly.
It's unbelievable. The draft, they had the talent they've accumulated, and really they just need the quarterback to bring it all together. It could look a lot like what we saw when Tom Brady went to Tampa, and all of a sudden it's like, oh my gosh, this team's a juggernaut. We might see that with the New York Jets.
We might see that. I mean, I don't know what to think of Mekhi Becton, but they played most of the year without Vera Tucker. They're really good at the guard spots. I would imagine there's a high percentage chance their first round pick is one of the top 3 tackles, so, and Green Bay's O-line wasn't great last year. And, you're throwing to Robert Tonyan and guys like that. I mean, this is an upgrade.
No doubt. And get yourself a tight end in this draft.
Right.
Do that in the first round at all. So it's really shaping up nicely for the New York Jets, but they've got a lot of competition, not only in the AFC East, but the entire AFC. So AFC just gets stronger with this trade. I wonder what it would look like if Lamar Jackson went to the NFC, right? And all of a sudden I'm the best quarterback in the NFC now, and that could happen very quickly for a football team.
Absolutely. And maybe Rodgers doesn't have this ability since he is an NFC team, but wouldn't you much rather go to the NFC if you're Lamar or Rodgers? I mean, it's not even close.
Yes, absolutely. Or a head coach looking for a job or anything.
Anybody.
Much easier path in the NFC right now. No doubt about that. You mentioned tackles there. We've got some pushback on some of our takes from earlier podcasts this week. One on Peter Skoronski, one of the offensive tackles. Is he a guard in the NFL? One of the top offensive linemen in the NFL draft? And what about those contracts now that we've seen the structure for Daniel Jones and Geno Smith? Next. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Of course, there's still ways to bet on the NFL, even though the season is over. Off-season mode, you can bet on the next Super Bowl champion, the next NFL MVP, or tons of draft props that are growing at FanDuel. And of course, NBA season is coming to a head as well. And now is the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sports book, because new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, super easy to use. Love the website. Love the interface there. Then you can bet on everything from money line, point scorers, threes drained. Plus, FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with same-game parlays. So don't miss the chance to get your no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. Matt, taking a look here at just a little pushback here. Let's finish up the quarterback conversation of this. Izaz is a Seahawks fan and a faithful listener to the show. Shout out. He says, Brian and Matt, you mostly subtly rolled your eyes at the Geno Smith contract. But it's basically a 3-year, $75 million contract with $40 million guaranteed. I think it's a steal, and it doesn't hamper anything for their plans for the team going forward. And if you and I also want to point out that the Daniel Jones contract as well has the 4th year is $56.5 million, which he's probably never going to see. So instead of that 4-year 160 at $40 million per year, it's practically a 3-year $112 million contract, so $37.5 million per year. Still some big cap hits to come in 24 and 25, but a little lower $19 million cap hit this year for Daniel Jones, and that's why they wanted to get that done, to fit everything in that they could, rather than him play on a bigger for the first year 1-year contract. So as is usually the case, Matt, when you see the structure, these contracts not quite what is immediately leaked from the agents. Daniel Jones contract, still don't love it, because I still don't want to pay him $45 million next year, which is what he's, that's going to be the cap hit next year. And I just don't think he's that player. For Geno Smith, though, Izaz has a point here about it not really fundamentally changing what the Seahawks can do, whether that's draft a quarterback at 5 if they want to, or just go ahead with Geno as their starting quarterback.
Yeah, my apologies, because we didn't spend enough time talking Geno because Daniel Jones kind of stole the show a little bit on that podcast. So you're right. I mean, bargain might be a strong word, or steal might be a strong word, but I think
it's not a steal. It's not a steal for a guy who's had one good year in 9. Right.
Side note, I pulled up his contract too, and he already laid it out. He nailed it. This is crazy. For the 39th overall pick to have 10 years experience in the league, he's only made $17 million. Like if you're highly drafted and you last in the league, you would think you had some big contracts. This guy never has. So works out great for him. He gets to cash out late in life as a 32-year-old.
Yeah. I do want to say it's a great story, and I love it for Geno Smith, and I'm glad he's able to cash in, and it's a really cool story. And he had a phenomenal season. I don't want to take that away from him at all.
Agreed. But I think you're right. I think it's a very good signing. That's the cost of doing business. He's a starting quarterback. I now believe he's one of the top 32 in the league. I think you can win with him. He wasn't as good at the end of the year as he was in the middle and the beginning. That gives me a little bit of pause. But I am very much in the market if I'm Seattle with 2 first-round picks. And with that first pick, I think I want Anthony Richardson, and this doesn't prohibit you at all.
There's been a little smoke, actually. I saw a report this morning about Anthony Richardson and the Seahawks potentially being the selection. Seahawks are in a great spot because they can allow one of those quarterbacks to fall to them. Maybe if they decide, oh, man, we actually have a trade offer and we want to do that and continue to add extra first-round picks in the future, they can do that. Or they could be sitting there and looking at Jalen Carter or Will Anderson at that pick at number 5, right? So, I mean, they're in a fantastic spot, have another first-round pick on top of that. They already had the best draft in the entire NFL last year, and now you have a cost-controlled starting quarterback. And right now in the NFC West, they're the only team that knows who their starting quarterback is going to be in week 1.
Yeah, I think they're in a great spot. Like you said, they played a ton of rookie snaps last year, got a lot out of them, premium positions like tackle and corner. And I used to look at this draft and think, you really want to be in the top 4. There's going to be Carter, there's going to be Anderson, 2 quarterbacks. Well, I think top 5 now is the same, that there's going to be 3 quarterbacks, Carter, Anderson, so Seattle's going to get a premium player in a draft that doesn't have that many premium players, whether it's a quarterback or a win now defensive player that they need desperately. And then you're on the clock again at 20, which is phenomenal. And they may even have extra day 2 picks. I don't know that off the top of my head, but
they do. I just Locked On 49ers. If anybody's a 49ers fan, check that out. Today's episode was about the NFC West, and we looked at that. The 49ers, because of the Lance trade and the Christian McCaffrey trade, don't have a pick until their comp 3rd-round picks, late round 3, and they have 3 of those, but they don't pick until pick 99, basically. The Seattle Seahawks have 5 picks before that, and 4 of those picks in the top 53 for Seattle.
That's phenomenal. They're in great shape. I mean, I also think that'd be a great spot for like Herndon Hooker. He's he's injured this year.
He's the Geno Smith of this draft, basically.
Absolutely. Like that's a great time to deliver.
24-year-old. He's a little older prospect, if I'm not mistaken.
He is.
So get yourself the 24-year-old version of Geno Smith, maybe.
Yeah, he tore his ACL in November, so he might not be ready for some time. I don't care. I got Geno for $25 million. So if they get one of those 5 quarterbacks, they're in a really good spot. Crazy thought.
Okay.
What if they were to like trade for Wilson from the Jets? Someone that's like worth nothing now, and we'll give you a 5th-round pick for him, take him off your hands. I just want a young, talented quarterback in that building.
Right. If they decide not to do it in the draft, I could absolutely.
Yeah. Right.
Kind of like how they took a flyer on Drew Lock last year.
Right.
Like, didn't beat out Geno. He wasn't our guy, but let's check out one of these other talented guys and see if we can develop something there. Yeah. And I obviously when Rodgers ends up in New York, if he does, and it's looking like it's a pretty good chance of that happening. It'd be probably best for everybody to get Zach Wilson out of there, right? I mean, you've already made that decision. That's not the guy.
Right. And I'm probably could come up with a handful of other names that were basically draft busts that are young that you could get cheap. And I just want one more young, talented quarterback in that building, preferably through the draft.
Where would Kenny Pickett, Matt, speaking of the draft and those quarterbacks, Josh has a question here. Where would Kenny Pickett rank among this year's top quarterback prospects?
Here comes Williamson homerism to no end.
Oh, no. If he's any higher than 5th, Matt.
We got a problem, huh?
Yeah.
Well, it just so happens, and you can find this probably on my timeline, that at the combine, this discussion came up. As you can imagine, I was on the air 6 hours a day. This had to come up. But it wasn't me bringing it up. It was one of my most respected analysts out there, Greg Cosell. Does everybody know Greg Cosell? He's a superstar.
Oh, yeah.
My buddy Ross Tucker calls him the GOAT of civilian tape watchers. And I think he absolutely is. Greg said, I'll take Pickett over every quarterback in this draft right now, knowing what I know now. I agree with him.
In week
part
one.
of it's right this second. Like if the Bears offered you pick number 1 for Pickett, he would say no, and I would say no. Now, that doesn't mean I'm totally sold on Pickett, but I can cheat a little bit too, and I've got one season of NFL tape to go off of where I don't with them. And this was also before the quarterback workouts. And we were basically saying, I got a lot of questions about all these quarterbacks. Like, if it was Trevor Lawrence or even Fields, like I would have traded Pickett for those guys in a heartbeat. I have less questions about those top 4 than I did pre-combine, but I still think I'd take Pickett. And I'm not saying he's going to be a star, but I'm sold that he's going to be a good starting quarterback. I'm going to get some blowback for that.
So this is on the surface, that sounds absolutely bonkers. That sounds nuts.
Yes.
I mean, if they were all in the same draft class, that's how I read this question. If they're all in the same draft class, Kenny Pickett would go 5th. He would go exactly.
Probably.
He wouldn't go top 4,
right?
And I don't think he would go 6th. He would go 5th. Exactly.
And might not even be a top 10 pick. He might be 20th again. You know what I mean?
I don't think I saw personally enough of Kenny Pickett to believe in the upside that I would take him over the potential of the other 4 quarterbacks in this class. And I think most teams would probably feel the same. And I think it would be absolutely insane for the Steelers to turn down the number 1 overall pick for Pickett. But that's because of the value of the pick and trading down and everything else.
Yeah.
Not necessarily just straight up.
That's a good call.
That reasoning as well, you would also think that Justin Fields would have immense value here in the same sort of a question. Like, if you wouldn't trade the first pick for Pickett, then you definitely wouldn't trade the first pick for Fields, which is why the Chicago Bears would be very smart to keep Fields in that case, just because of known quantity, right? Because any of these 4 quarterbacks could be busts, and I understand that part of it. But
sure.
I would flip the coin. I would bet on any of the 4 quarterbacks to have, with their upside, a better career than Kenny Pickett. And I wouldn't be worried about it if they busted, because I don't think the high-end potential for Kenny Pickett would be enough that I'd be killing myself for swinging for the fences, if that makes sense.
I absolutely get that argument. And as a rule of thumb, I want the riskier quarterback, the upside quarterback. I mean, my favorite quarterbacks their years coming out were Lamar and Mahomes. And, I know that there's risk involved, but give me I'm going to swing as hard as I can when I'm at the plate, because doubles don't let me. I don't beat Mahomes with doubles. You know what I mean?
Right.
So there is that aspect of it. And I'll be very honest, the 1 year ago version of Pickett, coming out of Pitt version, it would be below these 4, but I'm putting a lot of weight in having a whole season of NFL tape. And I thought he got noticeably better. His stats aren't great. I mean, his stats are ugly, but his play is much better than his stats. It's a good conversation. And I'm trying not to be a homer, because frankly, Greg said it first. And then I thought about it and I'm like, I don't think I would either, but it's a conversation. You would trade Brock Purdy for any of the 4, right? I have to ask.
Oh yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, the 49ers quarterback is another conversation altogether. We don't have time for that one. It's
right.
It is, and it has been a continual wild ride with the 49ers. All right, next, Matt. We got questions about Skoronski, NFL draft, Lamar Jackson, and some more questions about potentially what the records might look like for the Jets and Packers if this Aaron Rodgers trade does happen. And Chargers restructures as well. We'll see how many of these questions we can get to rapid fire in the final segment of today's Peacock and Williamson. By the way, make sure you subscribed up to the brand new Peacock and Williamson YouTube channel. YouTube.com/@Peacock and Williamson is where you can find it. We're not on the Locked On NFL channel anymore. Peacock and Williamson standalone YouTube channel. And of course, you can find it in all the regular places that you could before on the audio-only podcast apps. And make sure you check out everything else the network has to offer. Locked On NFL Draft. It is draft season. And of course, your team is covered right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Okay, real quick. Where did the Jets finish in the AFC East with Rodgers?
First.
Woo!
I think the Bills are going backwards. But I think both are double-digit win teams, and it comes down to Week 17 battle between the Jets and Bills for the division crown. That.
I think it's tight, and I think just the unknown of Tua makes it a little bit difficult with Miami. I'd have to put them 3. But how quickly does it – because Rodgers has taken some time with his receivers before. Does it just are they just hit the ground running in week 1, or does it take some time? Are they better in the playoffs? Are they better in week 17 than they were in week 2, 3? It would be my question there. So I might still take the Bills, but that's a close one.
That's a close one. I think the Bills in Miami will have worse rosters than they finished with. The Jets will have a noticeable better roster. And their defense is intact.
The flip side of that, with Love as the Packers starting quarterback, what would be considered a successful season there? Are they better than they were last year? Are they the 13-3 teams we saw from a few years ago?
I think they're happy if they're 9-8. And he looks like he belongs. Like, I almost don't care about the record. Just kind of like that Pickett conversation. Does he look like a starter? Is he out of the woods? Is he a good starter? Then it's a successful year. I don't know if they win 9 games, though. But
to be honest, I think adding a future first-round pick might be more beneficial for that reason.
Exactly.
To see Love, and then you have 2 first-round picks next year to maybe go attack a different quarterback if that's the way you want to go with the organization and start that new path.
I know this sounds crazy because the Packers are never down this road, but if he's bad, they could be a 4-win team and be in the first overall sweepstakes, especially with some firepower to move up. No, I like getting next year's picks for them.
Michael says, right or wrong, without the injuries recently from Lamar Jackson's last 2 seasons, I think he's missed 10 of his last 22 games.
I think he's missed 10, yeah.
Like does he get the full, are we even talking about this? Does he get that Watson contract? Is it all fully guaranteed and figured out already by the Baltimore Ravens?
I don't know. Maybe. Yeah, probably. Because he's so good. I mean, there'd be so much better tape. There'd be so many more wins. They may have been in the AFC Championship game. They almost beat the Bengals without him, So, yes, there would be more team success. He's such a driving force for that team. Yeah, if he plays every game, everybody's happy as could be. Yeah.
I think it does change the equation. I think there's a certain amount of guarantees, though, that the Ravens and probably most teams wouldn't go to anyway. But it might move the slider a little bit with more of the guarantees and more willingness to do something from the Baltimore Ravens side. I think it would have to change things.
I think he had signed a contract by now. I don't know about the guarantees and all that, but I bet he signed a contract by now if he would not have missed time.
Josh asks, the Chargers restructured Keenan Allen to keep him. Is it time for the Chargers to draft a first-round receiver to be his replacement? How about Jackson Smith-Njigba, who's basically the next Keenan Allen?
Same guy, yeah.
And just draft his replacement right there. I love that selection. But absolutely, they're in the market for a receiver, and they might need a couple of them.
They might. And I think they just really need team speed on offense. Like, Williams misses too much time. Allen isn't fast. I mean, with Herbert's arm strength, new coordinator, even if like a Jalen Hyatt, who's like the Will Fuller type, I mean, they need someone that can burn just to open up space. And Smith-Njigba is not that guy, but he's my number 1 receiver. I mean, I adore him. He'd be great anywhere. But I would be looking for speed.
Hey, and if you need a 170-pound speedy receiver, this is the draft for you, man.
Oh, lots of them.
And that'll be deep into the draft that you could find one of those guys. So, yeah, it would be shocking to me if they don't draft at least one and probably a couple of wide receivers.
I agree. I'd have to look at the Allen restructure. Is that just, I mean, he'll be back this year, but does that mean that he's probably gone a year from now? Probably.
Yeah, I think that there's not much more there, and you're probably just pushing some money into void years later.
Yeah.
Last one here from Michael. He said, is at BD Peacock being a little too harsh on Skoronski only being able to play guard? Wasn't that the narrative on Slater, also from Northwestern?
Slater's arms are at least an inch longer, if not more. I mean, I don't know this is a fact, but I've heard many people say it, and Lance Zierlein in particular, whose dad is no line coach, that there are no tackles in the league right now with his Skoronski's arm length. So are you being too harsh? Does he have to be a guard? I draft him, put him at left tackle, and say fail. If you don't fail, we'll leave you there. That's why I love him, like with the Titans, because they need multiple linemen. They don't just need a left tackle. He could fill in somewhere. I think he's the best blocker in this draft, period. But I'm doing this triple take series for the Steelers where I do my top 5 tackles, my top 5 guards. I put Skoronski this morning as my number 1 guard, and I think that's safe. But he might be Zach Martin. Zach Martin was this exact same guy coming out of Notre Dame, and he's the best guard in the last 20 years or something.
And so, essentially 33 inches is the cutoff for NFL tackles. And Rashawn Slater had the short arm thing coming into the draft, but he was exactly 33 inches. And so Skoronski's below that even. And that's still like about as short as any offensive tackle is going to be in the NFL, and teams just don't even attempt it. So I'd be shocked if the team even allows, like you said, which is fair. If you're a good player, let good players play. If he's a tackle, let him be a tackle, because like this is my thing. And there's a lot of tackles in the league that meet the length requirement, but they're not great pass blockers. So
right.
What's the point? Why not have a really good run blocking guard that's got short arms play tackle if the end result's the same anyway?
Right. And there really aren't 64 prototypical tackles like all these guys. Cody Mock, well, he's got to move in the guard. Well, there aren't 64 of them on every given Sunday, so there's dudes playing out of position to tackle all the time. What was I going to say about that? Oh, last note on Slater, though. Oh, you said 33 is the magic number. It is. Some teams won't even go that low. Some teams have a 34 threshold, and I guarantee you if Slater's arms were 34, we'd be talking about should they take Penei Sewell or Slater at 5, and he still fell to the mid of the first round.
Yeah, he still fell to pick 13, I believe it was.
Yeah, I think so.
And I'd be willing to bet my paycheck that Skoronski just starts a guard and plays guard.
Probably. And I bet he's great at it.
Right. Thanks for all the questions. Apologies to those questions we did not get to. We always appreciate them. Every week at BD Peacock, at Williamson NFL is where you get those questions in on Twitter. You can also drop a comment on the brand new YouTube channel as well for Peacock and Williamson. Make sure you're subscribed up there. A very special guest tomorrow to end the week on Friday's episode, Sam Monson of Pro Football Focus, to talk combine, draft, and of course, the start of NFL free agency right here, Peacock and Williamson.